At my sister's birthday party, my father took the microphone with the confident smile he used whenever he wanted to control a room. The house was packed with guests, and every detail looked expensive on purpose. Crystal chandeliers threw light across marble floors, gold dresses, and half-finished wine glasses. A string quartet played near the tall windows facing Atlanta's skyline, and the whole night felt like a performance that had been practiced in advance. 2 hours earlier, I had arrived with a bottle of vintage wine and the polite expression I always wore around my family. My mother barely looked up when she told me to put it on the bar, because her attention was already fixed on Tara, my sister, who was surrounded by friends like a celebrity on a red carpet. Tara laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that demanded approval, and her fiancé Ethan hovered beside her, smiling like he was auditioning to join the family. My mother made a small comment about me looking tired and working too much, as if leadership and exhaustion were character flaws instead of the cost of building something on your own. When I said I ran a company and that work was part of it, she responded with a distracted hum and immediately shifted the conversation back to Tara. She used the familiar line that Tara had been struggling and could use support. In our family, struggling had become a universal excuse, a soft word used to erase consequences. Tara had spent years hopping between plans that fizzled out, projects that never finished, and ambitions that depended on someone else paying the bill. Every time I reached a milestone, I was reminded to stay humble, as if success was something I should apologize for. I circulated through relatives and family friends who thought they understood our dynamic because they saw us only in curated moments. An aunt teased me about being single, as though my relationships were a scoreboard. An uncle joked that I was intimidating, and their laughter felt like sandpaper on my nerves. I stood near the bar pretending to check emails just to avoid being pulled into another conversation that turned my achievements into a punchline. Across the room, I heard people praising Tara for being free-spirited and describing me as the serious one, the one who was tied down to responsibility. I sipped my wine and swallowed the bitterness that always showed up at these events, because I knew what was coming even if I didn't know the exact form it would take. My father moved through the party like a politician, shaking hands, smiling, and collecting attention. When he reached me, his hand settled heavy on my shoulder, and his tone turned syrupy with expectation. He said I had done well, and then he slid into the real message. Family takes care of family. The way he said it made it clear it was not a suggestion. It was a command dressed up as love. Something about his voice sounded final, rehearsed, and dangerous, like he was about to make a move that would leave me trapped if I didn't react fast enough. When it was time for the toast, guests gathered and the music swelled. Tara's eyes met mine for a second, and for the briefest moment she looked nervous, almost guilty. Then my father lifted the microphone, and the feedback squealed through the room. Conversations stopped, glasses lowered, smiles froze halfway into place. He stood in the center as if he owned not only the house, but every person inside it. He started talking about generosity, family bonds, and the kind of love that looks good in photos. I felt my stomach tighten because I recognized the pattern. He was building a story that benefited everyone except me. He turned toward me and announced, with the bright confidence of a man expecting obedience, that I would be giving my penthouse to Tara. He framed it as a beautiful gift from one sister to another, as if he were presenting a charitable donation rather than taking my home. The room burst into applause and shocked gasps. Some clapped because they thought it was romantic. Some clapped because they were trained to clap when a powerful man made a declaration. Cameras came up. People shouted congratulations. Tara covered her mouth with her hand and performed surprise, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere when she spoke into the moment. My mother dabbed at her eye like she was watching a heartwarming scene instead of a public humiliation. 30 pairs of eyes turned to me, waiting for my smile, waiting for my nod, waiting for me to keep the peace. My father extended his hand as if he expected me to place my keys into his palm. He said it was only fair and reminded everyone that Tara had been struggling. Then he delivered the line that exposed the truth. He told me I could always buy another one. That sentence landed like an insult wrapped in privilege, because it made my work sound effortless and my life sound disposable. Something inside me snapped. Years of swallowing comments, paying bills quietly, and letting them rewrite reality all crashed together. I set my glass down carefully, not because I was calm, but because I didn't want my hands to shake in front of them. I said no. My voice wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, and it sliced through the applause like a blade. My father blinked as if he hadn't heard me correctly, like the word no didn't belong to me. He asked what I said, and I repeated it. I said I was not giving away my home. A ripple moved through the guests. Some looked offended, as if my refusal had ruined the entertainment. Others looked curious, because conflict is magnetic when it is not happening to them. My mother hissed that I was embarrassing the family. I turned toward her and said I had supported this family for years, including paying for more than people realized. I said I had paid for major parts of the party, the food, the wine, the staff, and I had done it without being thanked because gratitude was never part of my role. Tara's eyes filled with tears that looked practiced, and she pleaded as if she were the victim of my boundaries. She said it wasn't like that, but it was exactly like that. My father's smile disappeared. His jaw tightened, and he stepped closer with the microphone still in his hand, lowering his voice while making sure the room could still hear. He accused me of defying him. Then, before I could move or even fully process the shift, his hand struck my face. The sound cracked through the music. My head snapped to the side, heat flaring across my cheek. My earring flew off and rolled across the marble floor until it hit a chair leg. The room gasped, but no one stepped in. No one moved. Not one guest, not one relative, not one friend dared to interrupt him. That silence told me everything about what they considered acceptable when it came to me. I straightened slowly, touched my cheek, and looked at my father. He waited for me to cry, to apologize, to collapse back into the version of myself he could control. Instead, I bent down, picked up my earring, and said a quiet, happy birthday to Tara that sounded more like a closing statement than a celebration. Then I walked away. The hallway outside the banquet room felt colder, as if the walls had absorbed every unspoken rule of our family. Behind the doors, the music restarted quickly, too quickly, a desperate attempt to pretend nothing happened. That was how my family survived shame. They turned it into background noise and expected me to do the same. I walked toward the elevator with steady steps. In the reflection of a glass console table, I caught my face and barely recognized the calm. It was not peace. It was the stillness of a decision finally made. I pulled out my phone and tapped one button. A call I had saved for the moment I stopped negotiating with people who saw me as a resource. My best friend Kayla had warned me months ago that if they crossed the line again, I should not argue. She told me to call the one person in the family my parents feared. My grandmother, Margaret. At the time I had laughed and said I could handle it. Kayla had looked at me and said, handling is not the same as being free. Now her words echoed in my chest as the elevator chimed and I stepped inside. Outside, the warm Atlanta night wrapped around me, but I felt numb, not because I was weak, but because the shock had shifted into precision. Headlights swept across the driveway as a black sedan pulled up. A tall woman stepped out, composed and unmistakable, her silver hair catching the light. She did not need to ask what happened. She did not need a summary. My grandmother's presence alone was a verdict. We exchanged a single nod, the kind that carries history, and then she walked toward the house as if she owned the ground beneath it. Inside, the party noise was still trying to survive, but it faltered as soon as my grandmother entered. Conversations froze mid-sentence. The quartet stuttered and stopped. She addressed my father by name and asked, evenly and clearly, why he had laid a hand on his daughter. My father's posture changed instantly. His confidence drained as if someone had unplugged it. He tried to explain. My mother tried to soften it into a misunderstanding. My grandmother warned them not to hide behind that word because she had watched them use it for years to excuse cruelty. Then she turned her gaze to the guests and made the room feel smaller with her silence. She said every person who applauded the public taking of my home had participated in the humiliation. She said my father did not run a kingdom. She said authority without respect is just fear wearing a suit. She told them to find my earring, and the demand was not about jewelry. It was about consequences. It was about making them face what they had knocked loose, what they had treated as disposable. My grandmother's voice did not rise, but it sharpened as she spoke about accountability. She said she would rewrite her will and restructure what she controlled because she would not reward a man who used power like a weapon. The room reacted like glass under pressure. My mother gasped. Tara froze. My father tried to protest, but my grandmother did not negotiate. She was not there to debate. She was there to draw a line that could not be ignored. When my grandmother looked toward me, her expression softened just slightly, and she told me I owed them nothing. She told me to take my life back and walk away clean. I held my earring in my palm and felt how something small could carry so much meaning. I looked at my father and told him he wanted obedience, and what he would get instead was silence, the kind that echoes long after people stop pretending. I looked at Tara and said she could have said no too because complicity is still a choice. The party ended in a scatter of murmurs and excuses. Guests grabbed bags and phones, suddenly desperate to leave before the story changed again. The quartet packed quickly. The air itself felt eager to escape the room. Outside, Kayla was waiting near the black sedan with her arms crossed, protective and steady. She asked if it was over. I told her it was. We got in the car and drove away as the house shrank in the rearview mirror, its bright windows looking less like luxury and more like a cage that finally lost its key. By morning, the consequences were everywhere. Someone had recorded enough of the announcement and the aftermath for the truth to spread fast, and my parents could not control the narrative the way they controlled a dining table. People love a spectacle, but they love accountability even more when it is caught on camera. Business partners began to distance themselves from my father. Social circles that once praised my mother's image started stepping away. Tara's engagement cracked under the weight of public reality, because it is hard to marry into a family that mistakes dominance for love. I did not give interviews. I did not argue online. I did not defend myself to strangers. I sat in my penthouse as morning light stretched across the floor to ceiling windows and felt something I had not felt in years. Silence that was not punishment. Silence that was mine. Kayla scrolled through her phone and told me they were trending for all the wrong reasons. I poured coffee and said they wanted attention, and now they had it. She asked if I felt better. I told her not better, just done, because sometimes healing begins with finality. Later that day, an email arrived from my grandmother with simple words that carried the weight of protection and proof. The paperwork was being handled. The boundaries were real. The future was not a performance anymore. That evening, I stood by the window holding my pearl earring between my fingers and fastened it back into place. The reflection in the glass looked like someone I finally recognized. People think revenge is loud, but the truth is that the strongest choice is quiet. It is choosing yourself, protecting what you built, and refusing to return to the role that made your life smaller. If you have ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you, you are not alone.